Hello and welcome to Lyndon Radchenka. I've asked Lyndon to help me with something here where I'm going to break a story.
So, with this crisis in mind, what is the proper way to set this up at the start of the story?
Generally speaking, we need to find some way earlier in the story to have what we call a commitment moment. So these are like the big 4C moments, right? You have the first you have a catalyst. So at some point, the problem arises in the story. Now, in short stories, we often will set that catalyst in the backstory. So probably this story, I'm going to start after the catalyst moment. So again, especially in a short story, you want to begin as I say, in medias res. So kind of in the middle of things. So probably I'm going to begin this story with the email that this person, sends. I'm going to call them Lyndon. So Lyndon is working for the government. Lyndon's in charge of the laser, the anti-alien attack laser. And Lyndon is going to. So I'm going to start the story maybe with the email that Lyndon sends, saying like, I'm writing again in relation to my email dated March 5th, in which I request authorization to fire laser CZP 1138. You denied authorization to fire this laser against, this laser, which was designed to repel an alien attack at the attacking aliens. I believe the basis for your denial of my authorization was that I erroneously requested authorization to fire laser CZP 117. The reason that this request was actually an authorization request for firing lasers CZP 1138. However, it contained a typo due to the fact that a piece of the ceiling fell on my keyboard as I was sending the email. I am re-requesting authorization to fire laser X CZP 1138 at the attacking aliens, which, since it was designed for this purpose, or something like that. That's going to be maybe the first page, this like email that the person sends off. So in that example, again, the catalyst is on the first page in the sense that I'm explaining that in the past, aliens have attacked the Earth. I requested authorization. I was denied the authorization. These are all the problems, right? Now, inherent to that, unstated, but inherent, is this person's not firing the laser, even though they have a laser firing. Like, the reader has to figure that out. And that's kind of where the comedy is kind of under the surface a little bit. But like, I'm seeding that, right? So I'm setting up the situation of the story. I'm establishing the catalyst. Aliens attacked the Earth. That created this conflict, this external conflict. That external conflict resulted in this person requesting authorization, but they accidentally had a typo. Therefore, the authorization was denied, right? Because this is the bureaucracy, yep. Right? That has all happened in the past. So the catalyst has already happened in the past. Layered in there, again, I'm not stating it, but layered in there is this reader's understanding that this person has a button they can press to fire the anti-alien attack laser, and they're not pressing it. Instead, they're requesting authorization to press it. So that's not being stated explicitly, although it is kind of technically it's understandable by the reader there. By the end of the story, so in this case, I hope you see I'm setting up the conditions for the crisis. Like, late in the story, it's going to have to become clear to this character that they could just fire the laser button, and it's got to become clear to us, the readers. If it's not already clear, if we're not picking up on it, later we're going to make it clear to the reader and the characters. Now, because it's comedy, I'm going to make it clear to the reader a little sooner than I'm going to make it clear to the character. But the other sort of thing that ties into your question is we need to get this character into what's called a commitment moment. And what that means is we need a commitment from the character that they're going to pursue the course of trying to resolve this conflict. Now, In this example, I've actually, again, because it's a short story, I'm trying to be economical and be quick. So I'm going to commit the character relatively quickly to the course of action. So note what's happening kind of structurally speaking here. So just to kind of trace that a little bit, this conflict has arisen in the past. The catalyst is just the moment that conflict arises. I need a moment where the character is committed to solving the conflict. In other words, they can't just walk away and wash their hands of it and go do something else. And then I need them to be faced with the choice they don't want to make, this crisis moment. And then I need to fall out a climax, a conflict resolution as a result of that crisis moment. And again, that resolution can be good or bad for the character. It just has to be a resolution. Similarly, in that crisis moment, they can make it. Them not making it, doing something is also a decision that they've made that is going to result in something. And
that's the climax. Then yes, is whether or not crisis. They make the decision, they don't make the decision.
Whether they make the decision or not is the crisis. Okay. What happens as a result is the climax.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do in this story is I'm going to very early. Again, you typically want to. We need to commit characters early because we need basically a justification for why we're reading about this character. Or in this example, again, I placed the catalyst in the backstory so that the situation is very, very clear. From the first page, we get the whole situation, we get the backstory, we know what's going on, we know all the conflicts have been established. It's very economical. Plus, it's kind of like silly and jokey that we're reading about, this thing fell on his keyboard and therefore he got a 778 and therefore the government denied the request, right? As if they couldn't just read into like, well, obviously he's talking about, the laser that does exist and it is called 8 rather than the laser that doesn't exist called 7. So on my next page, is going to maybe be the second email he sends. The next email he sends is a follow-up. So I haven't shown the original email. I've referred to the original email. Then I'm going to have the next email. It's like, I understand you have denied authorization to fire laser CCP 1138 at the attacking aliens. I have to, now. So in this scenario, they get a denial of authorization for this. Okay. If the character doesn't commit, then they now are going to not fire the laser and the story's over. So I need them to commit. In this case, what commitment means is they're going to send another email. Again, like it's the laziest, what's the laziest possible thing they could do? Now, again, it's absurd. In a normal story, they would do something more active and like bigger than this. But we're kind of in a comedy world where the whole joke of the story is, how ineffective and papery this reaction is. So instead, I'm going to have them. But the fact that they're sending another email, like, I know you've denied the authorization. So initially, it's like maybe they didn't deny the authorization, right? Maybe they just, didn't understand my email. I'll just send another email. I'll sort it all out. Now they've gotten a reply that is like, no, you can't fire that laser. So now they have to make the decision. And, am I going to pursue this or give it up? So if they give it up, the story's over. If they commit and pursue it, now they're locked into trying to resolve that conflict. And, we have a story on our hands. So keep in mind, if they don't commit, now we don't have a story because they could always just walk away. Now, in this case, we've done a couple things that you want to typically do in a story, which is provide like increasing motivation for them to stay on the track. Because you always got to keep in mind in your story, like, why can't they just leave and quit and stop trying to resolve this problem? And typically you'll have different, depending on the genre and depending on the situation, there'll be different like things you have to do as a writer. In horror movies, you almost always have to deter, like in a crime, if there's a crime and somebody has been like, one of the big problems you have in a horror movie or a crime film or something, or some story where like ordinary-ish people are being persecuted, you get a big problem. Like, well, why don't they just go to the police and pass the problem off to somebody else, right? Why do they have to? Why does Vin Diesel have to save the world? Why can't, he just get his accountant to do it? There's got to be some reason, right? Again, you got to commit them to the story somehow. In this case, the character I've automatically committed in a certain sense. This is the person whose job it is to fire this laser. So on one hand, they've been passively committed in the sense that, they're the ones there who could fire the laser. They also have been kind of actively committed in the sense that they're choosing to continue email, and continue pursuing it. But also, like, there's the aliens attacking. So keep in mind, like, aliens are attacking because their attacks are increasing. The longer we don't fire this laser, the worse the alien attacks are going to get. And therefore, the worse the situation is going to become, the more dire it is to fire the laser, et cetera, et cetera. So we have, like, inherent in the structure of the story is the idea that it's going to get increasingly more important that we fire the laser. So an unworkable idea might not have that structure. We might have to add things to make a different idea workable. If it lacks what we call, sometimes this is called a crucible, which is like something about the situation that makes it a situation that is increasingly getting worse if nothing gets done. So if you don't take action, or if you take actions that fail, the situation gets worse. That's what we want ideally in the story, is that every time this guy sends an email and doesn't fire the laser, the alien attack increases and gets worse, and there's more problems. Maybe, he's ends up getting trapped in the bunker in the office. He can't go home anymore because the door was destroyed by an alien blast. He's stuck there, and he doesn't have, he can't just go home and when 5 o'clock comes, he can't just forget about the lasers and his job and pass it off to the next guy on shift, that kind of thing.
So then to summarize, we have our moment of we have our commitment. He's stuck in this room. He has the button. He's not pressing it. The crisis is, does he press it? Does he not press it? And that eventually leads us to the climax.
Yes. So in this case, just to kind of backtrack for a second, I probably want to physically commit him, because the structure of a job like this is somebody else would do it at a certain point. Like at a certain point, your shift's done and someone else is manning the laser. So I got to eliminate that possibility. You got to think through the logic of the story, right? So I got to eliminate that possibility. I got to be like, I'm writing to you again to request to authorize it. I understand you haven't denied my request to fire, the laser 1138. I must ask you to reconsider and please and approve the authorization. I know that normally, I should note that normally, Thomas would be emailing you at this time, but Thomas has been killed by an alien attack and is no longer able to take over my shift.
No longer employed, yeah.
Or whatever, is no longer employed at this company, employed in the office of, whatever. Maybe I can actually get the Bureau of Alien Attack.
He's been killed by an alien attack, and therefore you understand he will not be able to make his shift tonight.
Yeah, I would want to get, however I do it, I would want to get that into the second email. I can't, I'm the only one. There's not someone taking my shift. I can't even go home. I'm stuck here. All I have to do is write emails and look at the laser I'm not firing. I need to make that situation clearer and clearer. Because again, you want to remove the outs. What are the logical, and this is any story you want to think through this. What are the things that they could do to just solve the problem? Even if it doesn't solve the overall problem, how do they solve the problem for them? The problem for a lot of people is you'll see this, we have to get rid of their cell phones in a horror movie often, right? So they can't communicate with one another across a distance. Maybe we got to get rid of, the idea that they can go to the police, right? Maybe the police are crooked, or the police they do go to the police, but the police fail to do anything effective. And therefore we can see the police are a dead end. Or maybe, in this case, again, the logic is that somebody else would take over the laser shift. Someone else would have a shift. We need to remove them. Maybe the logic is that he could go home and just leave the room with the laser and stop thinking about it. We need to remove that idea, right? We need to kind of just keep stripping away, increasingly, things they could do to get out of the situation. And they also, as they're trying things, we need to just keep closing down the options. So if you think of like a story as like this character has 20 options to resolve their problem, we need to just keep closing them, like closing all those doors till eventually there's only one option. Eventually, at a certain late point, like I say, it's going to become clear that they will never receive authorization. Therefore, they have to decide, and will they just press the button? So again, let's imagine we get them forward to that point. So the details of how we get to that point that's just sort of a mathematical, we figure out what's the funniest option. Like what's the funniest way for it's just a matter of like laddering it up. You have like a few really simple things you're doing. When I say simple, like it's not that easy, but it's like, it's always the same thing. It's always like they're trying something. They're trying the next biggest thing that makes sense in the situation to try to resolve their problem, and it's not working. So in a comedy, I'm just trying to think of what's the funniest next thing. What's the funniest next thing they could try to email this? What are they going to email about next? And what's the funniest way for them to be denied? Like the funniest reason for them to be denied that request. Like, for example, the laser hasn't been tested might be it. I understand you don't want to fire laser because it hasn't been tested. And, we don't know whether or not it would work to repel an alien attack. I would like to, I know that the testing stage was interrupted by the alien attack. And therefore, I understand your concern. However, I must remind you that there is an alien attack in progress.
Yeah, and
we could, of course, should we fire the laser, and should we fire the laser, we will then know whether or not it can repel an alien attack. In this example, we could combine the testing and implementation phases and in fact reduce the budgetary cost. Please consider this proposal.
Yeah, and I imagine at some point he's going to be responding to an out-of-office email, and that is when he'll have to decide whether or not he's pressing the button.
That's actually a good idea. That's a good idea. So now maybe he gets, in response to that, he gets an out-of-office reply. And now he's replying to that. So again, we're not showing their things, but like now he's replying to this, like, I received an out-of-office reply to my last email, whatever. Therefore, I am, writing to you instead, kind of thing, right? You see what I'm saying? Like,
or he's responding to that person again.
Yeah.
Knowing that he's
when you come back when you come back in the office, please, whatever. So this is the thing. Like, I unfortunately cannot leave the office because the doors have been the doors are no longer are malfunctioning. And luckily I have Tom's lunch. Tom has been slaughtered by alien invaders and therefore will not eat his lunch. So I've requisitioned it, or whatever.
We're at the crisis. We're at the climax. You need to make
So fast forward.
Now decide which you're going with. What happens?
So what has to happen in the climax is they have to, by this point, it has to be clear that they're not going to get the authorization. So it's clear to them. We probably realized it like from page 1, but now it's clear to them. They also have to be clear by this point that they do have the option to actually just fire the laser. Like there's no code they need or whatever. Maybe they found the code.
There's no code.
If they were lacking the code,
no one else. There's no one else working to tell them not to do it at this point,
or whatever. Yeah, it seems like everyone else is dead. Maybe or whatever. Maybe even the aliens have started replying to their emails. Who knows? Whatever. But by this point, it has to become clear to them that they do have a choice and they could make the choice. And then the question is just, do they make the choice? Do they fire the laser or not? So again, if it was not a comedy, they would have fired the laser before now. In a comedy, I have the option. It's more palatable to kind of have an anticlimax in the sense that I could have them decide not to fire the laser, or I could have them fire the laser and it doesn't work or something like that, right?
You just have the story end awaiting your response.
Yeah, I could have them just decide not to. So the question is it just becomes, now at this point, it just sort of becomes a question of like, what I think would be funniest in this scenario, right? What I think would be the funniest option. In a different story, I might not go that way. I might have a point I'm trying to make. Maybe I do. Like maybe I have a point about government bureaucracy I'm trying to make. Maybe this whole story has been some sort of metaphor for COVID responses and, whatever, so maybe like my theme is going to dictate it a little bit. I like to shy away from that kind of stuff because I feel like you too quickly get into an artificial situation where you're doing something that's not as funny instead of something that's funnier because you're trying to make some sort of point. And to me, like if I'm going to write a funny story, like the main thing is that it'd be funny as possible, because I think that's going to be like what's going to stand the test of time is the thing being as good as possible. But different people have different priorities. So you might at this point decide to use X or Y or Z because it aligns with your point you're trying to make. I would just be trying to figure out what's the funny. Is it funnier for them to fire the laser or never fire the laser? That's what I just would want to determine. So probably, or like, I'm always thinking about audience responses. Does the audience want him to fire the laser or not want him to fire the laser? Now, I don't always want to do what the audience wants, but I want to be cognizant of like, it. So what I would maybe suggest, normally, of course, you want the character, let's just go with the thing you would normally do, which is you normally want the character to make the choice. Like make the hard choice, because otherwise, like, why have we been reading the story and following this character if they're not going to do anything? Right. But I will point out like your idea there of like awaiting your response, awaiting your, that does work in a comedy. We could pull it off. The non-choice, they don't do it. The anticlimax, that can work in a comedy much better than it can work in a non-comedy. But I'm going to, let's say, make the choice that they decide they're going to fire the laser and so then what's the climax of that is simply all there is to it. Like, what's the climax of that? Well, there's a couple climaxes.
Now, if I may interject,
so
does it matter in this situation? Does it matter what the outcome of him firing the laser is on the greater conflict of the alien invasion? Do we need to know whether or not that works or not?
It does, in a sense.
Is it more entertaining for his final email to be, I've fired the laser. I understand that this is going to get me fired. Here's my resignation. Well, and that's the end.
So this is where I'm kind of going towards. So I would actually, that's what I was initially thinking, but I'm going to back it up a little bit. So the trick of the crisis moment, before we get to this climax, the trick of the crisis moment is we have to figure out like, well, why is he going to do this thing that he's been avoiding all along? Like, what's going to get him to the breaking point where he's going to fire the laser? Okay. What's going to get Lyndon to actually resolve the internal conflict? Because keep in mind, the external conflict, it seems like that's what is the focus of the story, but actually the internal conflict is the focus. That's really the thing we have to resolve. And I think fundamentally what this person has to like do is they have to get over the idea that they need authorization to fire this laser. I think there's a couple ways to do this, but what I might suggest is they're going to resign and then fire the laser. It's like, I'm ready to submit my resignation because, whatever. I'm beginning to feel like I would suggest they're going to, submit their resignation.
As someone who's no longer a government employee, I am allowed to press this button.
Yeah. Now that I am no longer a government employee, I'm going to press the button and fire the laser. And then, P.S. Now that I'm no longer employed, I do not require your authorization, and I will fire the laser.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, like, maybe the climax is, maybe what I would probably do at the end of this story, the climax, I would probably finally have a letter from somebody else. So maybe I'd have a letter from the prime minister, thanking him for firing the laser. Or no, I would have a letter maybe from his, boss saying, we regretfully accept your resignation. The prime minister would like to thank you for firing the laser. We are going to have to cancel your retirement because you have resigned, prior to whatever. We are going to have to cancel it. You have, lost your retirement savings. Yeah. We've emptied the account, but You know what I mean? Like I would probably do something like that. So I'd break the form. There's a couple important things in what I'm saying here. So maybe there's a funnier thing I could think of if I thought of it longer. But I would maybe like the decision to quit and then fire the laser. They sort of interlinked to me as like getting over the need to be a good worker in this job. They kind of go together in that sense. Breaking the form at the end, and finally there's a letter somebody else as opposed to just his letters out. Finally there's like we get to see a response as opposed to just hearing about a response. Anytime you do a formal shift like that, like you break a pattern, it works well at the end to break a pattern and signal like an end or a shift. So it kind of signals that things have resolved and the story is over, formally speaking. I can kind of get the joke in and get a bunch of like, yes, they're thanking him for firing the laser, but also, you know, they got to strip him of his 401k or whatever, right? Like, you know, that kind of thing. Like there's no really rewards in being a hero, you know.
Due to the expenses that we have incurred,
or they send him a bill
firing the laser.
They send him a bill for firing the laser, you know.
Retirement plan.
Yeah, because maybe like, yeah, exactly. You know, now he's a private citizen. You know, it cost him $201,000.88 or something to fire the laser because they need to buy the plasma back, whatever. They decided not to put him in jail for firing the laser. The prime minister has, you know, decided not to put, you know, signed you know, maybe the president signed an executive order so he doesn't have to go to jail. They've pardoned him, but they're going to, you know, charge him for firing the laser since he was acting outside of the role of a
or like the government is going to launch a civil suit against him or some other ridiculous.
So we hear about so yeah, I would say something like that. So yeah, you've been pardoned in the criminal suit, but you know, a civil proceeding will begin or something, you know, that kind of thing. So again, like
so we have the story. Okay, so we have
that's the short story.
We're moving on, but I note that there are often set pieces to talk about. There's looking at how the acts break down, and we'll deal with those one at a time.
So what I mean by set pieces, I think a really useful way to kind of think about. Let's talk about this in the context of shifting to like how would we do it differently as a movie. Because this is a bit more relevant in terms of a movie idea. Okay, let's say we're going to do a movie instead. As I say, in a movie, you need to it has to be longer, right? I'm talking about a feature film as opposed to a short film. So if we're going to do a feature film of this idea, it's going to have to be longer. It's going to have to emphasize external action more fully than we can't just get away with like showing a bunch of documents on the screen, like, right. Or even like the guy sending emails or talking on the phone. Like we got to make it more interesting and the action focused and have them leave that office, right. And do other, we got to have more locations. We got to do a bunch of things. One thing that we're going to do is we're going to not start in medias res. In a movie, we got to establish what is the world before the problem arises. That's a bit of more of a thing we have space to do in a movie, and something we have more of a kind of need to do in a movie. You kind of have to establish what's the ordinary world that we're in before this extraordinary, you know, conflict arises and throws everything off kilter and off balance and so on. So sometimes this is called a setup in the movie. So I might actually start, you know, this movie with just this guy going to work, you know, or, you know, maybe the credits are kind of rolling as like, maybe see like an empty bowl of cereal. You know, what you want to get in a movie, what you got to get as fast as possible, you have to get to an image that displays the basic situation before things begin, and that has some sort of thematic resonance.
And we don't necessarily need to break down the fine details of what a movie, like how you would convert this to a movie, but from a conceptual
level. Let me give you one thing though that I would maybe do. I wouldn't maybe maybe I'd come with a better idea than this, but like I would want immediately to establish something about the character and about the world the character is in. Right. So I might like just have like an empty bowl goes on a desk. Maybe I have like this metal desk, and maybe like an empty bowl goes on the desk. And then maybe we have like milk poured in the bowl, and then we get the cereal poured on top of the milk. It's like the reverse of how typically people put, you know, cereal in. And that gets us sort of, and then we maybe have a coworker comment on how it's weird that this dude is putting the milk in before the ceiling. He's like, well, it's more efficient that way.
Yeah, this is where you would introduce those elements that you were talking about.
Yeah, and then we see like what room they're in. We see what the world is. We see what his job is. We see this big laser in the background, whatever. Like we get introduced to the world, but there's no alien attack yet. So we get this set up, we get whatever. We get like some talk about like, what is this thing about? This is a rule follower. This person does, he's like, do you ever think, doing your cereal different? Or he's like, no, it's like, I do it the way that my mom taught me to do it this way or whatever. Right. Anyway, as you move on, eventually we get to the catalyst, aliens attack the world. We've learned, and then, we get like him rushing, to the office or whatever. And he gets to the office, he like, instead of running to the laser to fire it, he runs to like the computer and like fires off an email.
Yeah.
And then like, he's just sitting there waiting. And then we like cut to like the other office, where this guy like grabs an email and prints it out and like runs down the hallway. We got to like make it externally action oriented, Now I don't know where we go precisely, but the absurdity here, maybe like in reaction, like they run, like we'd have to get like more detail, like why isn't he just firing it? Maybe like it has him in tests, like I say, and he's like, I don't know if I fire it, is it gonna work, whatever. Maybe they run back, and because he's notified them that like maybe he like notifies somebody, like maybe this is a secret government project. It's become clear they're not going to use it. Then now he has to go and get like, maybe he's been locked out of the room now.
Well, it's this idea that cinema is a visual medium, and therefore you need external conflicts to your character, and prose is an internal medium. And so you can get away with just internal conflict. So when you're looking at converting short stories to film, you need to have things to look at. And that makes sense. And so when you're considering how to expand your story, you need to look at what elements of visual conflict you can introduce to make it cinematic.
And we need to really see we need more external obstacles. So we need like, maybe at some point he gets locked. He gets fired really early. And he's no longer allowed to touch the laser or something. He can't go to it. Now he's got to figure out how to get, back in there. And, he's got to maybe recruit some people to help him break in, or I don't know what he would do exactly. But like, the point is we got to figure out these exactly like you said. We need to shift the emphasis to external emphases.
Yeah. Well,
this is where the set pieces idea comes in.
Yes.
So just to get to your point in the example here, what I mean by set pieces is just, especially in a movie, but it's also relevant in other types of stories. I need to like spend some real time, like serious real time, sitting there and thinking, well, what's fun and cool about this idea? And what does it allow that I want to write and that the audience maybe wants to see or read or whatever? So I literally would want to sit down and think, okay, what's cool about an alien attack? What would be funny about it? Maybe the alien, like, are the aliens going to attack in a funny, strange way? Is there like some cool thing they can do? Like, what's like the set pieces are sort of often in a movie, the cliche of this is a car chase, right? It's like, what's something that this premise gives me the opportunity to like do something that's cool and interesting and awesome, or funny in this, or scary if it's a horror movie, right? Like, what's scary about the situation if it's a horror movie? What's, what's philosophically interesting about the situation, something that comes into play in science fiction, right? What's like a tech thing that would be cool to look at, just literally Blake Snyder, who, wrote a number of screenwriting books, calls this fun and games. Like where's the fun and games that the audience has been promised? Like when they go see Spider-Man, they want to see Spider-Man shoot a web, right? They want to see him swing. They want to see him make some jokes. Like there's things that the audience wants. That's kind of like, it's the fun and games. Like, so what's the coolest thing he could shoot a web at? What's the neatest way for him to get kicked across the room? Right. Like what's like there's a level at which you need to kind of figure out what's cool and interesting and fun about the idea, Or if it's horror, like what's scary and terrifying and nightmarish about the idea? Like what's like the core of that thing in terms of, where can you really go with it? That's interesting. And what you're going to get when you kind of sort that out is you'll get a bunch of like things that don't really connect. They're just a bunch of like cool, weird, scary, whatever, funny, strange things. Then you just kind of figure out like, well, how do I kind of make them work? Like if, like the moment where he, like maybe I got the idea that the aliens kidnapped this person. Like the aliens, take him, and maybe I want like the aliens to probe him, right? Like that's something the aliens, do supposedly is, kidnap, take people to their ship and probe them. Is there a way to make that? Does that work for one of these big moments? Is that like a moment where he's got to make a decision? Is that like the moment where we first learn about the conflict, like the catalyst? Does he get like captured before? Do the aliens capture him before the invasion starts because he's the person who runs the laser? And does he then have to escape from the alien ship and get back to Earth and press the button because he's the only one with the code or whatever? I don't know. Like those are the things I want to figure out, right? But it might start with just like, and I want to figure out like, how do I get these set pieces into the story? Like if I want, a scene, if it really matters, or I think it'd be really, funny for there to be a scene where, they have some sort of like they have to get the president. Maybe I want to see the president like cowering in some way, like, or I want to have like a hero. This movie called The Other Guys which had a really great moment like this. It's like you start with like these cops. It's like a buddy cop pick that has Will Ferrell and Marky Mark in it, and it starts with like the super cool cops that like always, do everything awesome and solve every case. It's like Samuel L. Jackson, and I forget who the other guy is. And they like, they take down a thing and they bust everything up and they blow everything. They do all the cliche like cop hero stuff. And then at one point they're like just about to like, they literally jump off a building and like fall like, well, we got to go catch these bad guys, and like jump off a building, like to go, land on the roof of another building or something. And of course they just fall into their deaths and die. And it's like, now the movie's about these other guys. And it's such a great like moment of like, oh, maybe I could do something like that in this movie where it's like, there's a hero that comes, he's going to fight the aliens, and everybody's, rooting for like this thing to happen. And then all of a sudden, like, of course, the aliens just immediately destroy that. Now we've got a big problem on our hands, or what have you.
I think you've made your point then on set pieces. Can you talk a little bit more about not story structure, but the idea of the 3-act structure versus the idea of the 4-act structure?
So you often hear people talking about like movies or stories fall into like 3 acts. This is especially a thing that gets touted in movie books, like movie writing, screenwriting books, and so on. I mean, some stories have 3 acts, but there's really nothing natural about that. And usually, if you really look closely, what you'll see is that actually these movies have 4 acts. And an act is just when you have like a series of sequences together, and by the end of, this, that, and the other thing happening, some irreversible change has taken place. So, let's say we have our scene, our movie where this person, this middle management, functionary is trying to stop an alien invasion. Maybe there's just an act where they're trying to help the real hero stop the alien invasion. Then the hero gets killed. So that like, they might have spent a whole like 30 minutes of the movie, as this, trying to help, like as a secondary character, trying to help this hero. And now that person's dead. they can't like go back to trying to help them. Like they can no longer go backwards. They have to like move forward and have a new focus for a length of time. So typically you'll have like a few moments in a movie. So typically like the end of the first act is when they get committed. Right. So you don't, it's not a rule, but it pretty close to a rule. Like pretty much in a story, your first act ends when the character is committed. There's no way for them to get out of the trying to solve the problem now. Typically your last act begins when the crisis action is taken. So they do the biggest thing, and then the last act is just the fallout. The last act is the climax for the most part, generally speaking. In between that, we have a bunch of different stuff happen. And when I see people running into problems with their writing, like as craftspeople trying to write something, it's usually because they've committed this idea that somehow that has to be one big long thing. So I'm writing a movie and I need to, 60 pages in the middle or 100 pages in the middle where like we're just doing one thing. Almost always there's not enough going on and it starts to get thin and it becomes hard to write and so on and so forth. What usually makes more sense for a writer is to split it in half, or more than half, like to split it up in terms of like, there's these big things that they're doing. And then like they just, completely have to change their tactic. And they just can't keep going towards that. They have to go somewhere else. Now, what I see, there's no rule about this, but what I notice a lot is that most movies actually break into what we might consider 4 acts, because most movies have a midpoint reversal. Now, in a TV sitcom, you tend to have 2 acts, that are broken by midpoint reversal. In a movie, you tend to have 4 acts, the middle 2, which are kind of divided by midpoint reversal. And when I say midpoint reversal, what I mean simply is, so this isn't something that is necessary to put into a movie story or into any story, but it often helps quite a lot, especially in the movies, to have a midpoint reversal. And that's simply a moment about halfway through the story where the character completely reverses their tactic. So you'll see this a lot in certain genres more than others. In horror, almost always, what you see is a trajectory where they're trying to run away from the monster, and then they're trying to defeat the monster, right? Like, so often, like you have this build in horror where it starts out like, this monster kind of comes into the world. They're first denying the existence of the monster, but that doesn't work, right? Then they start to like realize that there's a monster there and they're trying to get away from it or, escape it somehow, but that's not working. Often in horror, they literally get locked in somewhere with the monster by the middle, or just otherwise becomes clear that they can't escape the situation. After that point, which is usually around the middle, typically everybody who has been denying the existence of the monster is dead. Everybody who's been trying to escape the monster has and just has no ability or wherewithal to fight the thing has also been killed. And now you're just left with like a handful of people, or maybe just one person who is going to fight the monster. And that may, of course, not be so easy. They may not know how to fight the monster, but now they're actively trying to figure out, okay, what's this weakness? Let's learn more about the monster. Let's, they're actually pursuing knowledge or a weakness, or trying to get an object, or trying to do something, or even just, trying to get a weapon, trying to hunt it down, whatever. So it's not always right in the middle, but usually you'll have a moment in a horror story around the middle where they kind of are reversing their tactic. Instead of just trying to deny the thing and escape it, they're trying to, kill it, or escape becomes like more directed. Like they need to get out of this, off this island where the monster is.
And that ties in really well to the way in which I know you to plot your structure, which is with index cards. So talk about how that works.
So let me give one other quick example of a reversal before I do that. So another reversal that you see really commonly is in a story where a character has been wrongfully accused of a crime. Almost always the character is running from the law because they've been wrongfully accused of a crime, right? So they get committed in the sense that they get accused of the crime, they try to clear their name, but they're committed. So again, for the first half, they're typically running and trying to clear the name or whatever. And then like halfway through, they'll figure out who actually did it. And now they're trying to pursue that person. So they go from kind of being chased to chasing. So that's sort of shift, or sometimes they'll get a piece of information. Like, maybe I will learn halfway through the story that maybe I'll learn like that there is a laser that can defeat these aliens. Right? Maybe I don't know that. What I might actually do in this particular story example, if I was making it a movie, this person works in a government office and they don't in a secret project, and they don't know what the project is. They just know what their job is, and they don't ask a lot of questions, and they just kind of do what they're told, and they just go 9 to 5ing it. It's good to work for the government. You get a lot of benefits. You get a lot of perks. They get, captured by the aliens. There's an alien attack. And then midpoint through the movie. So here's where I'm going to like write on cue cards all the different, so I got these cue cards, right? I'm literally going to do a couple of different things with like little cue cards here. Is first, one big thing I'm going to write is like all the big changes that could take place in the story. So there's like a big change, which is like, alien invasion starts. And then, here's a story of how the alien invasion was ended, right? It goes from alien invaders to they're gone. That's the big change of the movie. What I'm going to write on cue cards is maybe what are the smaller changes or what are like scene ideas. So I like colored cue cards because I like to I'll have like a green card will be like maybe something I've locked down and I know this is correct and I'll do this. Before that point, I'll maybe just be using like red. I'll get like Sharpies and I'll use like red cards maybe for like, these are just like random ideas. Or what I really like to do is like, I'll put like random ideas on this. Like it'd be funny if, Lyndon gets probed by the aliens. So that's just a weird idea. There's no story or a scene there really, but like, I don't know what the point of that would be, but like, maybe I think it's funny. And I just want to put on a yellow cue card. On the orange cue cards, I might put, I probably will do more like, these are actual things that happen. In a story, something happening means like a change is taking place. So I go like, Lyndon learns he's working on a anti-alien laser project. So that's like, on an orange card. I don't know where it goes in the story yet, right? I know, but it's like a change that's taking place. You go from not knowing something to knowing something. Then I might have, again, another card that is like yellow card that is like, Lyndon gets kidnapped by the aliens.
So you're color coding your cue cards like then, where depending on the type of moment they are.
And really like and where I'm at in terms of developing in the moment. So to just make it really clear with a precise example. So I'm writing on, let's say I'm going to literally do it. So I'm going to write on this card, Lyndon gets probed. So I don't have an idea there other than I think that might be funny.
Of course you do.
So, but I have a real idea here. Lyndon, this is a big moment in the plot. Lyndon learns the secret project is an anti-alien laser. Okay. Now, eventually I've got a bunch of these things, right? I got a bunch of orange and yellows, a bunch of ideas. but they're not really in an order. They don't connect, whatever. Again, the big things I need to figure out before I've done this cue cards, I've figured out the change for the story, right? What the story's about. Before I've got Lyndon as a character figured out. I've got the core conflict figured out, right? Now I got to figure out those big 4 moments in the story. And I might add a 5th moment, the midpoint reversal. If I can find a good midpoint reversal, it'd be great. Again, I need that commitment moment. Probably he's going to be mostly passively connected in the sense that, aliens are attacking everybody. He's got to survive the alien attack. So maybe like for the most part, he's running around in the. So most of the first act's going to be like building up the situation and the aliens attack. Lyndon's committed in the sense that he has to, he has to like maybe the person he's been following gets murdered, etc. Again, what I might decide in this example is the aliens, kidnap Lyndon. It looks like they're just taking him to probe him or something, but then they actually pull him in. Maybe they pull like his friends and maybe he like sees like his buddy getting probed. And he's like, oh no, I'm next. But they actually don't take him to get probed. Maybe they take him to another room. And, he's thinking like, oh no, this is what's coming, But an alien comes in and starts communicating with him and asking him questions about the project. And maybe like in the course of this scene, so maybe I'm kind of combining these things, right? So I may, Lyndon, thinks. So now I've got like a scene where it's like, okay, I'm going to put on here. Like, so actually I've got like a scene where Lyndon gets captured. Lyndon's crew gets captured. And then I've got like a scene after that, like Lyndon, taken to a room, thinks, or I'll have like Lyndon witnesses probe. After being captured somewhere. And then, Lyndon learns, Lyndon interrogated. And during the course of that, he learns the secret project is an anti-alien laser. So Lyndon,
so just as you're doing this so that I can conceptualize it, how many colors do you use and how would you classify each color?
So I use 4 just because the cue cards.
Level.
I use the 4 because the cue cards that I buy are 4-color cue cards.
Okay, fair enough.
There's no rule. You can do whatever you want to do. I know most people who do this just use 1-color cue cards. I just like these colored ones.
Okay, so then there's 4 levels then that you typically use.
Yeah, so my levels
solidified ideas.
My levels are random ideas that don't really have a story structure.
Yep.
Then an actual scene idea or a sequence idea or an act idea. So something that's like it has a story structure, like something's happening. So something's changing. Just, it goes from this to this. He learns a thing. He didn't know something, then he learns it. He's alive, then he's dead. He's there's no aliens, then there are aliens. Like, like a change, which could be a scene, it could be an act. We could have a whole sequence for the aliens. So like aliens attack Earth right? Aliens attack Earth could be a single scene. It could be a series of scenes and make up a sequence. It could be a whole act, but I'm going to write like aliens attack Earth. Eventually I've got like the red ones I'm just using for like a problem. So red ones are just like, I don't know what's going to happen. Like I'll put like something like on a red one would like something I need to figure out with this story then would be why doesn't Lyndon just hide and wait for the attack to be over? I don't know the answer to that question. I need to ask this question to commit Lyndon. Does that make sense? So when I'm like putting these things on a cork board or whatever, like when I'm layering them out, I know this is the commitment moment, or becomes before. It's around the commitment. I need to solve this problem, but I don't have the solution. And once I solve it and I lock it down, I'll write it on the answer on this card and throw this one away. Same like if it's a random idea, but I figure out how it could be a scene, as you say, it kind of graduates here. Ideally, it skips over this and gets to the point where I know what I'm doing in a bit more detail or what have you. And then it's just a matter of building that out, right? You just keep fleshing it out and getting closer and closer to the green. So that's how you're working on the story. You can visualize. What I like about cards is you can visualize in the story and you can move them around and stuff. Sometimes people will do that on a computer system. Sometimes they won't do it at all, but I recommend doing it. And then I usually will do it in tandem with actually writing scenes. Like if I have an idea for like, Lyndon doing the interrogation, maybe I don't know precisely if that's going to be a midpoint or if that's going to be the commitments end of Act 1, or maybe it's going to be later. I don't know exactly maybe, but I could write a draft of it just during my writing time. And then like maybe writing the draft of it will help me have ideas. Maybe I'll see that like it's too, maybe I just didn't think of something that I now realize as I'm writing it, it's going to be, maybe I'll just write versions of it, right? Like I'll write like maybe 3 versions of it, one that would work. And I'll just try to like test ideas out in the draft as I'm trying to like structure the overall story. Like,
sure. And as we talk about, so as we start to wind down this conversation, and we're talking about actually drafting things out, just touch then on the units of measurement in drafting, which are of course sequences, scenes, and then writing in beats. And that's where we'll end the building story conversation.
Sure. Yeah. So that's a good point. So again, I would typically be dividing my writing time up in a couple ways. So I think like, first off, of course, I've got a regular writing time when I'm going to work on this thing. I know I'm going to work on it. Let's say I'm writing 9 to 10 every day, or 9 to 11 is when I'm working on, this movie or short story, whatever. I'm going to keep using the movie example now that we've moved to the movie. If I've got 2 hours a day that I'm writing this movie, I'm going to maybe spend, depending on what stage I'm at, if I'm still trying to break the story and build the story up, I'll spend maybe most of that, like 90 minutes breaking story. And then I'll spend 30 minutes. I'll spend a little bit of time just like writing some of that story. Like I'll write a test scene. I'll write a draft. Again, what I'm trying to do here is figure out, is this a fun idea to write? Is it a workable idea? Is there enough like external stuff happening? Is it exciting? Is it funny? Is it interesting? Can I get some good jokes here or whatever? I'll just sort of divide the time up. Eventually, I'm going to move more towards drafting and almost, and away from story breaking, because I will have, of course, over time, I break more of the story and I'm spending more time just writing. But I'll always spend a little bit of time doing story breaking before writing. So, because that's the order of it. You kind of break the story and then you do the drafting. So early in the process, I'm breaking story on this macro level. I'm trying to figure out big things like, who's the character? What are the big acts? Like, again, act 1 is maybe going to be aliens attack. So like maybe I have aliens, maybe I just have like 4 cue cards I'm really trying to figure out initially, right? The 4 big C's. What's the, maybe like if I've got 4 acts.
Yeah, your commitment, your crisis.
So you might start with 3. You might start with aliens attack. Lyndon tries to figure out how to stop the aliens. Lyndon, uses the laser, breaks into the base and uses the laser against the aliens. Maybe I got like 3 acts. Then I add a 4th and I split up that middle one into 4 acts. Maybe, Lyndon trying to stop the aliens is like half of it is Lyndon is trying to run from the aliens. The other half is Lyndon, trying to get back to the base, where the laser is, let's say. And then I just keep expanding it out. Eventually I want to get to like those 4 big moments. What's my commitment? What's my, crisis? What's my climax? Whatever. I just keep getting more granular. So I'll get more and more cue cards. And eventually I've got, so I'm doing the big scene moments. I'm doing the big acts, however many there are. I'm doing the big sequences, like in Act 1, aliens attack. Maybe there's like a sequence where we're kind of setting up the world as like before. Then we have like a scene where the aliens attack, the first attack. Then we have like a sequence of a number of scenes where we see different parts of Earth and we see aliens attack different places or whatever. And then we see how it affects Lyndon, whatever. So I'm just kind of building it out. At a certain point, I've gotten to the point where the whole thing's mapped out, except like in scenes. So eventually I've got like all my, I've got like 80, 90 scenes or whatever it is, right? Maybe it's 45, whatever. I mean, there's no law of how many like scenes you're going to have. But like I've got all my scenes on cards and I'm just going in and like writing scenes. But before I write the scene, I'll spend a little bit of time. So eventually I'm got to the point where if I'm spending 2 hours a day writing this thing, I'm going to spend maybe 10 or 15 minutes just kind of thinking of like, how is that scene going to work? So what's like the start, first, second, third beat of the scene? Like, okay, this is the scene where, Lyndon gets interrogated by the alien. Maybe the first beat of that scene is, he's sitting in the room by himself. He doesn't know what he's doing, but he assumes he's going to get probed. Then the alien comes in. Then, I'll literally just like point form it. Okay, this happens and this happens and this happens and this happens and this happens. And eventually, Lyndon learns X. The whole point of the scene is like, once he learns, so basically the scene is like begins with the alien coming to interrogate him. It ends with him discovering what has that he it runs this laser. So the scene is going to end probably where the alien figures out Lyndon is. But here's the real key of it, though. Let's say I beat that scene out. Okay. What I'm going to realize at some point, and hopefully I've realized this before I actually start writing the scene, because if I don't, it'll destroy my structure for the story completely. So maybe if I wasn't doing enough of the outlining and structural work in ahead of time, what's going to happen is when I get to the scene, it's going to destroy my story structure. And here's the reason why. If the scene is about how Lyndon is interrogated, and in the course of the interrogation, he learns that the secret project he was working on was an anti-alien attack laser. Okay. What's happening on the other side of that table is the alien is learning Lyndon doesn't know anything. And what does that mean, Lyndon? It means that he is expendable and there's no reason to keep him alive. Right?
Yes.
Now, if I haven't pre-thought of that, and so in other words, this is not just a scene. You got to think of the scene from both sides of the conflict. This is where Dan O'Bannon talks about dynamic conflict, because it's always action reaction. So like, as Lyndon is learning that the secret project he was working on is this crazy like anti-alien laser, the alien is learning that Lyndon doesn't know anything. And there was no reason to capture him in the first place. There's no reason not to kill him right now. That has a consequence, right? There's a causal consequence now. Whereas the next thing they're going to do is kill Lyndon. So the next thing Lyndon has to do is not be killed, like figure out how to escape being killed. So if I haven't pre-thought of that and planned that that's going to be the next scene, it's going to totally derail my story once I write the scene and realize that's what's got to happen.
Each of those moments that you just described, those would be beats. Those would be,
beat is an action reaction pattern that's happening inside of a scene. But it is worth pointing out, like this is what Dan O'Bannon Dynamic Conflict is about. His whole book, if people read that book, is all about this idea that the same thing that's happening in a scene on a beat level, this action reaction pattern, is also happening on this macro level with the conflict. As they're trying to fight the alien is trying to kill them. The alien has a goal. And you have to, as a writer, also think about the alien's goal, or whatever your antagonist is. You have, it's always an action reaction. And so what I find, if you just start writing, like you just sit down and start writing a draft, you won't have spent enough time thinking about how the world reacts to this person's actions. And basically your plot is this chain of like, this person is acting in order to resolve a conflict. The world is reacting. This is how McKee talks about it. So I'm going to use the McKee thing for a statement, way that McKee talks about it for a second. The world reacts to the character's action, by basically denying them what they want, the resolution to the conflict. And then there's a little kind of gap opens up, like this little sort of this moment in which they sort of realize that the world has denied them the resolution they require, and they have to react to that, by taking a new action or deciding a new course of action or what have you. And you just keep laddering that. So because it is a complex chain and it has that causality to it, it really helps to just plot at least the basics of that schematic before you start drafting. You'll just save a lot of time in drafting, and you'll realize sooner what needs to change in the overall story. And you can kind of move your structure, keep changing. What's nice about cue cards is you can just throw them in the trash and write a new one, and they only cost a fraction of a penny. And you can move them around, you can see them, and so on and so forth. So that's sort of the nutshell of how I would take this premise and break it both as a short story and as a movie. Hopefully people can see the differences required, but it is fundamentally the same process.
I think we started from, as you said, the most macro level, and we've sort of drilled down into the most micro level of planning a story like this beat by beat. So I've been conceptualizing it almost like a reverse pyramid as we've been going. Mm-hmm. Do you have any stray thoughts that you think we might have glossed over or not touched on enough that you want to mention before we wrap up?
The last thing I want to note is that I know that when I describe this process, it sounds very large and complicated, and it sounds intimidating. But I want to point out that what this process is designed to do is to actually take something that is very large and complicated, like a story, and break it into smaller parts. So when, as you're kind of going through this kind of a process, eventually what you do is you end up with a big, cork board or a bunch of things, taped to your wall or whatever. And that's the story, and you don't need to worry about it. You all you need to worry about is one thing at a time. And when you sit down to write, you literally just have to pull a card off the wall, and you just worry about that. You've done the work of kind of figuring out how it slots into a larger schematic. You've done that piecemeal, right? So it hasn't had to happen all in an hour, like I'm kind of doing here or whatever, right? You really just need you get to have fun in the sense that you just need to focus your efforts and worry about this first paragraph or page of this one little scene that might run 2 pages. You don't have to worry about writing a 100-page, feature film. Similarly, if you're doing a short story or something, you just need to really worry about let me just draft the email that this guy drafts today. And I kind of have a map of how that's going to fit into everything. I can even just draft 5 versions of it and see which one is the funniest or which one kind of works. If I'm not sure what should happen, if I don't know what ending I want, I could write 3 or 4 different endings. And it's just it's a matter of testing and trying things and revising and dynamically altering what you're doing. It's not a process of getting it right the first time and having to work on this massive project. It's just about doing one thing at a time and just trying different things and discarding them if they don't work, and if they do work, moving forward. So I know it can seem kind of like an overwhelming mass of things that you have to do. On one hand, that's true. That's what writing a story is. But you don't have to do it all at once. In fact, so much of the writing process, I think, is about really just simplifying what you have to do right now and not worrying about all the other things you had to do yesterday or you got to do tomorrow. But having a process to kind of record all that stuff, whether it's on cue cards or in a document or in your draft or what, it helps, generally speaking, to externalize things in documents and papers and files, and it helps to break them down into achievable, discrete things. I'll often say to people, it's impossible to write a book. You can't just sit down and write a book and get up and you're done. I know one guy who actually does that. He will sit down and 4 days later he will get up, and he doesn't sleep or and but he's a madman, but he'll write a book in 4 days, or a movie script in 2 days. But he's been thinking about it and letting it gel for a long time, and he's got a process that is not visible in the way that maybe like my process is visible. You can see it on the wall over there, but it's not it's a madman's process. Like try to have a more sane, normal, achievable process that won't require you to jettison your life for months at a time or weeks at a time in order to write a story, is what I would suggest.
No, I can say, even from my own experience, that the more structure you can build into your process, the less daunting it seems. So I think that this approach of finding the big picture and then working your way inwards is definitely a good way to cut down on the stress that you have to deal with.
And the more fun it is, because you literally are just like trying to figure out, well, what's something cool that would be fun to write? Like I'll sit there and I wrote a story once called Explosions. And when I was literally just thinking okay, this story takes place in Hollywood. What would be fun is if Christopher Walken was a character and I could write dialogue like Christopher Walken talks. So I just did, I ended up doing that for a scene. And I just figured out well, how do I work that into a scene? What would it make sense to bring Christopher Walken in? It just becomes it almost becomes like a puzzle, a fun puzzle. And you get to be really creative and have a good time with it. And you don't have to stress so much about all the other parts you haven't figured out. You just literally can write on this card, I don't know what to do next, but it better be exciting. We need something exciting here. And you worry about that later. And meanwhile, today you're doing, whatever you have figured out. And you can jump around in the structure if you have it externalized too. No reason you have to write scene 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, right? And you can have these gaps and sort them out later. You can always kind of, if you can capture your process and have a process, it just makes it less daunting, but it also just makes it a bit more fun. So hopefully this has been informative and interesting and useful to people checking it out. Thanks, Lyndon, for helping me out with this. And hope everyone keeps it up and keeps writing the wrong way.